When I think of activity, I think of my mother, who's 89 years old and still runs and walks and dances. In fact, every year she runs the Turkey Trot, a 5K race, and usually wins it in her age category, 80 and above. This last year, she was beaten by a whippersnapper, an 81-year-old. She was kind of upset about that. She also dances, she walks. She took up Pilates a few months ago. My mom is the epitome of activity. Now, when I think about an 89-year-old doing that, I also think about what's my excuse. The good thing is my mom enjoys it to the max. Enjoy the journey.
Good evening, everyone. I am grateful to be able to be here with you once again. My name is Michaela Lawrence Jeffery, and I'm the pastor for the Athens Seventh-day Adventist Church here in Athens, Georgia. And wherever you're joining from, I would love to know. And so go ahead and comment in the comment section so that I know you're here. Remember now, if you were with us yesterday, then you'll know this already. But in case you're new tonight, want you to remember that part of the reason that I want you to make sure you comment and let me know you're here is because there are some wonderful freebies that I want to share with you when this is all over. And one of those freebies is several pocket tips. So these are cards that you can stick in a bag. You could even leave one at a friend's house, maybe, just tuck one away somewhere where they will notice it in times when they need reminders of the health commitments they've made, and also for yourself. And so there's a quote on there, and for each of the 8 topics, there are a few cards that speak to those topics. And so if you are watching with us every night, I am going to do my best at the end of all of this to make sure that you are entered to win one of these wonderful freebies. Another freebie is this magnet that when you put this on your fridge, I mean, it's a sizable magnet. You'll see based on it relative to my hand, which is fairly normal sized. It's a pretty big magnet, and it is a great way to remember the commitment you're making to your health. Magnets oftentimes are small, cutesy things, but this one is big for a reason, right? We want to remember the commitment that we're making to our health. And the other freebie is a journal. If you're a writer, I want to encourage you to make sure you let me know that you're watching so that I can perhaps enter you to win that freebie. Now, yesterday we looked at C, which was choice. And if I'll just sort of review a few things with you today. We're looking at the word creation, and each of those letters for the word creation stands for a particular topic. So C is choice, R is rest, A is activity. Oh, I forgot E, environment, then A, activity. T is trust in God. I is interpersonal relationships. O is outlook, and N is nutrition. And because some of our guests couldn't meet on certain days and whatnot, we've switched some things around. So tonight was supposed to be rest, but it's actually going to be activity. And we will talk about what it means to be active, how this pertains specifically to our health. So yesterday we talked about choice, and we were joined by Kayla Carmona. If you missed it, please go back and watch it. You can watch it on Facebook, you can watch it on YouTube, you can watch it on Twitter. You can find it in these different places and watch it again. So please, by all means, go back and watch so that you can get caught up and so that you can be blessed by what Kayla shared and the conversation that I had with her, which was fun to do. Tonight, I'm going to be your guest. I'm going to be talking about activity and answering some questions that, quite frankly, I'm not ready to answer, but I will answer them, and you'll get what I mean when I say I'm not ready to answer them. It's not that I didn't prepare so much as I wish I could give different answers to the questions that I have put together, to some of them, especially the first one. But yeah, we're going to talk about activity tonight. So, for those of you who have registered, you have received the study guide, the workbook, the big, nice, chunky workbook. And I'll hold it up here for those of you who have not registered and did not receive it. This is what it looks like. And as you see, there's creation, all the different topics, and it's a nice thick book. And at the end of each chapter, there are some really hands-on exercises that we can go through. I want to touch on last night's exercise. So yesterday being choice, one of the exercises that it had you go through was to think of a decision that you have to make. It may be a really challenging, difficult decision, maybe just complex in nature, whatever the case may be. And then it asks you to write down three options. What are your three potential options? And just doing that is a really, really effective way to think in a healthy way about the choice that you need to make. Sometimes the reason we stall in our choices is in our decision making is because we're not aware of our options. And when we actually take a moment to jot down, oh, I actually do have options here, then our mind starts to work in a more productive fashion. So that's just an example of what comes at the end of the chapter. Another thing we looked at, and I'll just throw the acronym up here, was HALT. And this was related to what conditions are not good for decision making. H is hunger, A is anger, L is loneliness, and T, what was T? Hunger, anger, loneliness. I gotta look this up. I'm forgetting what the T in HALT was. If you were on last night, you can tell us if I don't get to it before you. The T in HALT, tired. Okay, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. These are conditions under which it's not a great idea to make decisions. It's very likely that we'll make poor decisions under these conditions. So when you've hit any one of these conditions, just put on the brakes, halt, take a breather, maybe wait till the next day, maybe take a break from whatever you've been doing, switch gears, do something so that you can make a better decision. If you're hungry, eat, right? Things like that. So these are practical suggestions after the exercises that come at the end of the book. So if you'd like one of these books, please be sure to register. Go onto our website, athensdaga.org, and there you will find the link to 8 days, and you'll be able to register. It's not too late. It really isn't too late. Even if you decide not to register until Wednesday or even Thursday or even Friday, uh, it'll still be a helpful resource for you moving forward. All right. Now, I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything else before we get to today's today's topic, which is activity. And as a reminder, please, you're here. Let me know you're here in the comments so that I can count you as present and accounted for so that you can potentially win one of these prizes. And I do have multiples of a few things, so chances of you winning something are really good. Okay, let's talk about activity. The first question that I have for myself. Recently, I heard someone say that the problem with exercise is that you have to keep doing it. Okay. Of course, it's not really a problem, but it kind of is a problem. And the larger context in this comment was that with exercise, in order to maintain the progress that you've made, the strength, the flexibility, all of that stuff, you have to keep doing it. There's some things in life we just do a few things and da 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 da, it's done, right? Uh, but there are other things in life, like exercise, where we've got to keep doing it. And for some of us, oftentimes that poses a problem. Well, the question here is, what motivates me to stay physically active? Now, I want to make a bit of a distinction between activity and exercise because the two are not always the same. Okay. When we think of exercise, oftentimes we think of strength training or we think of aerobic exercise, something that's getting your heart moving, your blood pumping, all of that for a sustained amount of time, 20, 30 minutes preferably. Activity doesn't necessarily get you into that heart rate zone. Um, Activity isn't necessarily toning your muscles, at least not in a systematic way. So the question is, what motivates you to stay physically active? The question is not what motivates you to exercise 3 to 5 times a day or a week. Uh, what motivates me to stay physically active? Well, I wish I could answer this in a way that I felt was more maybe motivational, aspirational. But my answer to this is I want to keep up with my kids and I don't want to deal with chronic pain. That's where I am right now. I don't want to deal with chronic pain, which I have to deal with if I'm not exercising, if I'm not moving my body on a regular basis, just activity, and if I'm not exercising, as in sustained aerobic activity, strength training, that sort of thing. If I'm not doing these things, I am experiencing chronic pain because of accidents that I've had in the past, uh, things like that. Maribeth said, "Keep up with the kids." I hear that. Yeah, it's a real deal. So I think of my kids. I realize the fact that I did not have kids in my 20s. I had them in my late 30s when women are considered geriatric, uh, and uh, and so I have to keep up with my kids, who are currently 4 and 6. So these are not glamorous reasons for staying active, but they're real life reasons. What are your reasons? Okay, if you're watching right now, please comment. What are your reasons for staying active? Or what are your reasons for wishing you were active or wanting to become more consistently active? Now, I'll let you know what activity looks like for me. Because the next question here is, how do you incorporate activity into your life individually and or as a family? Well, how do I incorporate activity into my life? I garden. Right now, once the weather starts to warm up, in the springtime, I'm in the garden, which makes me feel like I have truly just become my mother, which is not a bad thing. But so often we think, oh no, right? If we've become our parents, then we've entered this end of life stage or something. But my mom is an avid gardener, super super duper green thumb, knows all the plants, by their scientific names, and I have come to love the garden. So this is one of the ways that I stay active. This is not one of the ways I exercise. This is one of the ways I stay active, physically moving my body. Now, here's the challenge. Okay. I made a distinction earlier between activity and exercise. Activity is not necessarily exercise. And if all I do is weed and plant and prune, I'm going to deal with chronic pain. Okay. If I'm not working on strength training, if I'm not stretching systematically, I'm going to deal with chronic pain because my body, due to previous injuries, cannot sustain a gardening life, at least not the sort that I try to sustain, which is not like a weed here and a weed there, right? Like I try to go all in. So I cannot just be active, but one of the ways that I'm active is by gardening. Now, one of the things that recently transpired in the life of my family is buying bikes. Now, we've had, all except my husband, we've had bikes for a while. Um, but then like a year ago, essentially, um, my daughters both, at the time at 5 and 3, released the training wheels. And then for their birthdays, later on, we got them bikes, big girl bikes. I mean, these suckers are big. They look like they're too big, but they can ride them just fine. And I had a road bike, not a mountain bike. My husband bought a mountain bike. Yes, we were able to find bikes during this pandemic. Hallelujah. And then more recently, I got a bike off of Facebook Marketplace. Wonderful. Thank you. $75, really well spent on a mountain bike. And now we've become a mountain biking family. Granted, we've only actually been mountain biking as a family 2 times. Um, but we do a lot of riding. And so that's another way that I stay active, and it is a better way to combine activity with some strength training, with some aerobic activity when I actually am in those moments when I can keep up a pace. So that is one way that we stay active as a family. Another thing that we do is go for walks, go for hikes. I am grateful to be part of a church family where a couple of our folks have been planning once a month a hike, and so that's been awesome to go on a hike on Saturday afternoons together. So these are some of the things that I do to stay active, uh, individually and as a family. Another question: were you raised in an active family? Yes, I was. As in, I always knew my parents to be people who enjoyed being outside and moving their bodies. I have a very vivid memory of being a kid and running around, being chased by my parents, and just thinking, "Oh my word, their legs are so fast. How in the world?" And I would just fall because I didn't want to have to keep trying to run. But I remember my parents being very active. They would participate, especially my dad, in sports days at our school and things like that. And we would go on walks as a family and bike rides. You know, the kids would ride as the parents walked, that sort of thing. So I was raised in an active family from in that way. Um, okay, yeah, so those are some of the ways that they incorporated activity. Another thing that they did was to get us swimming lessons, which for me happened late in life, aka when I was 12. And I was with a bunch of little kids learning to swim, which was embarrassing for a 12-year-old, but that was the beginning of my swimming journey. I took swimming lessons 2 more times. But that aside, they were definitely encouraging. You know, I had a bike when I was a teenager. I would just ride around. Um, I got rollerblades when I was a teenager. Got a better pair as an adult. Uh, Things like that were always encouraged. Staying active was always encouraged. Um, our workbook describes activity as the movement of your body and the development of your mind. Okay. So now we're shifting a little bit in this discussion of activity. Activity, when we think of it in a holistic way, when we're not just thinking of it as like the body moving, is also about the mind. Okay. So here's the question. Um, oh, and another thing from the book is exercising both body and mind can keep you alert and energized. Okay, so here's the question now. What are ways that you develop your mind and keep it active? Oh, this is a great one. So here's a way that I develop my mind and keep it active. I want to show you this, and I'm just gonna, there we go. Maybe you can see that. Uh, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to, there we go, there we go. Oh, no, where's the magic spot? There we go, there we go, there we go. Okay, so this is one of those things that I do that I also used to procrastinate with, but this is one of the things that I do to exercise my mind. Sudoku. I started doing Sudoku years ago in, game books, that sort of thing, or when traveling in the airplane, that was the spot. Love Sudoku. Yes, Jenny, isn't it great? Absolutely love it. And so for me, it's a better place to waste time than social media, where I can just sort of get trapped in all the happy places. And it's something that I know is really stimulating my brain to think critically, think carefully, be thoughtful. And so that's one way that I keep, um, excuse me, my mind active. And it's also a developing of the mind too, because the more you play, and I purposefully chose like a hard puzzle to show you, not because I'm on that level all the time, but because why not? But it's an example of something where you can progress, right? You start in the easy zone, you get the hang of things, and you keep on moving. Mary Beth said, "Same. Have a Sudoku book." Yes, 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 yes. You're real. You're a real Sudoku lover when you actually have a book, right? So that's one way that I keep my mind active. Um, Let me see. What are ways that you develop your mind and keep it active? So another aspect of developing my mind is reading. Now, I wish I could say I was an avid reader. I'm not an avid reader. There was a period of time in January and February of this year where I read 3 books, 3 or 4 books. Um, and to do that in 2 months for me is like miracle territory. Maybe it was more like January through March, but that was miracle territory. I would get up at 5 a.m., 5:30, and read. But that is definitely one way that I develop and energize my mind and keep it active. What about you? How do you? I'd love to hear from you. What are you doing to keep your mind active, to keep it developing? There are just certainly many things that we can do to keep it active, like watching tiny home videos, which I love doing. But to keep it developing is a different thing, right? There's perhaps more intentionality there. There's a desire to learn, to grow when it comes to actually developing our mind. And so I'd love to hear from you. What are ways that you are keeping your mind developing? How are you developing your mind? And how are you keeping it active? Now, excuse me. Before we move on to the next questions that I have for myself, I want to share from this book a little bit about activity because I think it'll be helpful for you, especially if you have the book. This is a time to remember what's at the end of the book and or at the end of the chapter, I mean. And it's not to say you shouldn't read the rest of the chapter, you should. But just as a reminder for what's at the end of each chapter. So here's a skill builder. And this again is about activity. Um, and the first skill builder says to plan your exercise. Hey, if you are feeling like, I'm active, but I'm not exercising, this is a great place to start. Plan your exercise. It says plan your exercise for 2 weeks, taking the opportunity to insert a variety into your activity. Okay. Another skill builder is exercise your intellectual muscles. Uh, so it says an important tool when it comes to developing your brain is the application of reasoning. We can't always have all the information we would want about a particular situation or decision. Therefore, we must rely more heavily on exercising our reasoning abilities to make good choices. Okay, and it gives some examples of how to do that. So there's certainly great tools in this textbook. Hint, hint, register so you can purchase one. Oh, here's a comment here. Thank you so much. Um, Jenny says, actually, right now I'm reading a book for self-growth, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Oh, mercy. That sounds that sounds rich. Because how do monk and Ferrari go in the same book? First of all, is what I want to know. So Jenny, you'll have to tell me more about that book later. Uh, Davina says, learning a new instrument in my old age. Awesome. What instrument are you learning? I'm curious. Please let us know. Uh, these are great ways to develop our minds, to keep them active. Um, and let's not just think in terms of how can I avoid Alzheimer's later in life, right? Because we see, ads and different conversations about that. Uh, but let's also think of now. Oh, violin. Oh, wow. I always said that I told my husband, he plays the piano, and I told him, let's not teach our kids the violin. Let's not have them learn that because I don't want to have to listen to my children practice. Maybe they can practice somewhere else and then just practice at home when they get good. Sorry, but no, I think that's awesome that you're learning violin, Davina. And Jenny says, I'll let you know when I'm done. Please do. Let me know all about that book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. So, what are other ways? If you're on here, don't hesitate to jump into the comments and let us know, how are you developing your mind and keeping it active? Um, Another aspect of this whole activity thing is time. If you can relate to not having time, I just want you to type me in the comments. Okay. This morning, I was thinking through the fact that I needed to spend some time with God, just one on one, talking to God about life and next steps. And when I say next steps, I'm not talking about like big life steps. I'm just like, what do we got on the docket for this week, right? That's where I am. And I was doing everything but sitting and talking with God. I went to the store to get some clothes for my girls because they're always growing, it seems. Why? I don't know, but yeah. I returned some flower pots that didn't work for something that I needed them for or thought I needed them for. What else did I do? Oh yeah, I finally dropped off some clothes that we're no longer using, no longer fit into, for the kids. Finally dropped them off at a thrift store that I love, Project Safe. If you're here in Athens, Project Safe is a great organization, and they have a thrift store off of Hawthorne Avenue. So I finally, I mean, I've had these bags for too long. So I did all the things except sit. And I had intended, it was about maybe 8:15, and I said, let's go to the botanical gardens, Michaela. Let's do that. Let's be in nature. Let's talk to God. And then it was, I don't know, 11:30, and clearly I was not going to have enough time to go to the botanical gardens and have a decent time there and then get home for lunch at a decent time. So I went to my church building, well, not the church property, not the building, but the property, and went to an area that we're developing into a prayer garden. And I said, okay, I'll just walk around here. I had my gardening boots on and just like, I'm just going to walk around here and talk to God. But I wasn't, because I was thinking about the garden that will one day be there and the things that need to be done. And yeah, so by now it's 12 o'clock and I still haven't made the time to sit with God. And so finally, I just had to ask myself this question: what is the problem? Why can't you sit? And at the end of the day, at the end of my questioning of myself, um, I realized that it came down to choice. Okay. So there's a reason why creation, as an acronym, starts with choice. Choice is so foundational, so foundational. And again, if you have the book, you'll see in the chapter on choice where it says that we choose to do good things, we choose to rest, we choose to create good environments, we choose activity, right? All of these things are a choice. And you and I, if you're tuning in here, I'm going to say you're included in this. We have the ability to make choices, good choices, related to these 8 topics. So, when it comes to activity now, coming back to activity, the reason I shared my lack of talking to God time this morning with you is that at some point we have to make a choice and realize that the ball's in our corner. So, before I get to the next question that I'm asking myself, I'm going to ask you another question. How many times are you using time as an excuse to not be active? Okay. So you could say in the comments, you could say every now and then, you could say all the time. You could say, actually, I'm pretty regular at staying active. Jot something there in the comments so we can all get a sense of how everyone is kind of working through this, right? So on now to the next one. Number 6 of my questions. What are ways that you find your physical activity impacting your mind and vice versa? Okay, so physical activity, I'll go back to what I do. I garden quite a bit right now because the weather is right for that. Except today, as I was trimming hedges, I literally was just being bathed in sweat. It was quite the humid day. And yay, Georgia heat. It's here, folks. Uh, but being out in the garden gives me really great thought time. Not so much with a trimmer that's buzzing and making a bunch of noise, but when I'm in the dirt, hands in gloves, preferably, in the dirt, whether weeding or creating a hole in which to put a plant, um, whatever the case may be, gardening has a way of slowing me down, even though I'm still active. It slows my mind down enough to multitask, kind of, to be able to think through different things that are going on. Maybe thinking about work-related things or home life-related things, family things. Uh, Maybe thinking about a conversation I need to have. I do a lot of sermon planning as I'm gardening, especially if there are weeds to pull. Perfect opportunity because that is a no-brainer. Okay. So literally, I'm pulling weeds and I'm thinking about the sermon topic and what I've jotted down so far and where this needs to move. And so gardening allows my brain to slow down to a certain degree that allows me to engage my mind in a way that is helpful. I don't think that I should always be active and like physically active and rigorously mindfully active, if that makes sense. I think there's a time and a place for that, but then I should also just allow myself to rest in creation as I weed, okay? To sort of recognize the plants that are growing and things like that. But that's one way, that's a way that my activity impacts my mind. Another thing that activity does for my mind is it 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 helps me develop optimism. So when I am regularly exercising, for example, I have a much more optimistic outlook. And we'll come to the topic of outlook, I think next Monday or Sunday. We'll come to outlook. I think it's Monday. Anyway, whichever day, we're coming there. Being regularly active, specifically exercising regularly, helps me stay optimistic. Um, I know, Jenny. Same here. Jenny says, for me, it's so hard to not think of something while doing an activity too. I know it's very hard. It's very hard. Um, but sometimes we've got to just let ourselves kind of be in the space that we're in instead of kind of in two places at once. Um, but yeah, so um, what was I saying now? Activity, exercise. When I'm not exercising regularly, I can be active. I can be maybe going on slow walks in the neighborhood. I can be gardening and still be anxious in my thinking, be projecting negative thoughts about potential, mishaps and missteps. Um, but when I'm exercising regularly, uh, endorphins, all those good, yummy things that you'll read about in the chapter on activity, those really help me to have a healthier perspective. Now, what I don't want to do is to send the message that if you're dealing with like, chronic anxiety or depression, just exercise and you'll be fine. I know that it's not that simple for all of us. But what I am saying is that there is a degree to which exercise, regular exercise, really does help me with anxious thoughts. So that's one way that my physical activity impacts my mind. Now, how does my mind impact my physical activity? Excuse me. Good question, Michaela. Um, I think right away that it's it's first the activity and then it's the mind. That's what I'm prone to think is like I need to be active and then I'll have the good outlook that then encourages me to do more activity. But the reality of things is such that uh, we can also start with our mind. How are we feeding our mind, right? And again, that we'll talk about that in when we talk about outlook. And I'll tell you now that our guest for Outlook will be Nicholas Zork, and so I'm excited to talk with him about Outlook. Uh, but what was I saying now? So when I am able to rein in my thoughts and shift whether or not I've been active, when I'm able to rein in my thoughts, remember that I have a choice to make that is often accessible to me, then I can go from mind activity and mind optimism and good reframing of my mind to activity. In one of the ways that this happens is through reading and specifically reading the Word of God. The Bible is full of reminders that of who God is and of why He's that way, which ultimately comes down to his faithfulness and his incredible love for us and the grace that he daily extends to us. And when I'm resting in that, for example, I think it was yesterday, or maybe it was I think it was this morning as I was finally processing why it was hard for me to be still and have time with God. There came a point in my Q&A of myself where I I wrote down, God loves me. And that was this beautiful aha moment. You know, if you are a Christian, you more than likely know the song, Jesus Loves Me, This I Know. And it's possible you've heard that even if you're not a Christian. It's easy for us to hear those words. It's easy for us to read John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave, and still kind of live as if God is distant, live as if God is disinterested in who we are and how we are. try to prove ourselves and, work for his approval or the approval of other people, that sort of thing. But just being able to sit with this reality, I'm loved by God, and what that means, right? That love means I have access. I have access to the throne room of heaven. I can speak to him directly. I don't need anybody, speaking on my behalf. Uh, what does this love mean? This means I have the opportunity to say yes to salvation. What does this love mean? Right? And you can go on and on and on. When you sit with that, that has a way of shifting your perspective in a positive way so that you can then move to physical activity that is healthy, that is developing your body and stimulating your mind. um, Now I want to think about, so the mind aspect there would be, the mind activity would be the reading of the Bible. Okay. So that would be an example of how the activity of the mind impacts then physical activity. So in those times when I just don't want to exercise, I just don't want to do anything, I'd rather sit on my bum, being able to come back to things that are foundational, such as the love of God, and going into the Bible to remember how God thinks of those He has created, will then can help me to say, okay, I can put work aside right now. I can put the dishes aside. I can put mowing the lawn aside, whatever that thing may be for you, and I can exercise. I can spend 30 minutes helping my body get stronger so that I can keep up with my kids, so that I don't deal with chronic pain, etc., etc. Last question. It says, at any time, feel free to share a story. So this isn't a question. A story from your life that you think helps describe your experience with activity. Well, I'll keep this super brief. Um, a story from my life related to activity. I um, have often struggled with activity because I have focused solely on exercise. And so I've beat myself up for not being able to, do the 5 times a week, 30 minutes each time, et cetera, et cetera. Several months ago, I started getting coached by a health coach through my insurance. It's one of the additional, perks of the insurance. You don't have to pay anything additional for it. You get a health coach. And I first started talking to Morgan, my health coach, about my sleep habits, which were not great. And then we shifted, and we've been talking still about sleep a bit, but also about exercise. And she asked me, why do you think exercise has to all be about, 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week? Why is that? And can you think of it differently? Can you maybe have a different starting point? And through that conversation, I was able to realize that, yeah, I can. I have this little cheapy thing called a Max Buzz. You may have your tracking device, a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or something, a Garmin, and it tracks my steps. And I said, maybe I can start there. Instead of obsessing over the fact that I should be exercising for 30 minutes, 5 times a week, let's start with 7,000 steps a day. Let's start with movement of my body. Let's start with not being sedentary. That has been a huge uh, mindset saver. Um, and it has really helped me to exercise without the guilt pushing me toward exercise. And so I want to encourage you. Maybe there's a way that you need to shift your thinking about activity. Maybe it's been helpful for you just realizing that it's not just about exercise, but it's also about uh, any kind of physical movement, and it's about the activity of your mind. Maybe just thinking of it in that whole more holistic fashion has energized you and is helping you now to take a better approach with it. I'd love to hear from you. Leave your comments whether now or later on, and let me know how you are shifting your thoughts about activity so that this can be a beautiful experience for you. Our time is very much up, and I'm going to jump over to Zoom. Those of you who've registered can meet me there, and we can dialogue a bit more about what's in our study guide. Tomorrow, we will have non me special guests. I'll actually be interviewing a couple um, about environment. And so join me for day 3 of our 8 days, taking our first steps to better health. Take care.